Welcome everyone to Africam4Good, brought to you by explore.org. And thank you for joining us today. We'll be having a discussion with or on one of Africa's most endangered carnivores, and certainly one of my favorite animals, the African wild dog or painted dog. Today, I'm joined by the wonderful Nadja Le Roux, who is the project manager at the Kalahari African Wild Dog Conservation Trust, and she's here to talk to us about all things wild dog. Nadja, thank you for joining us. Great to have you on the show.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Good to be here. Hi
You're very
from
welcome.
Namibia.
It's good to have you. Yeah, and I'm also, not too far. I'm in Cape Town. It's nice and warm here today. But before we get started, as we do with all of our guests, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, okay. So based in Namibia, from here, and background has always been wildlife related. I think I'd probably refer to myself initially as more of a social scientist, since my main focus was community-based natural resource management. So communities living with wildlife, but it was very general, very broad. And then, yeah, sort of moved now into more species specific, kind of all just happened. And I've moved more into sort of ecology, research, conservation, and focused on African wild dogs.
Awesome. Well, a pretty cool animal to be focused on. So, let's dive right into that then. Tell us about the Kalahari African Wild Dog Conservation Trust and what work your team does out there.
Yeah, so we're pretty new. I was working for the Cheetah Conservation Fund for several years, and initially started off with a species, wildlife species presence study in the Okakarara area, which is a big communal farming, like commercially farming communal land, and very little wildlife, very sort of unknown, and fell into African wild dogs, African wild dogs, African wild dogs, and was just going, well, what's kind of going on here? And so, yeah, saw a need that we needed to do something about wild dogs in Namibia. There's not really anything going on. And so, yeah, we sort of went it alone, still very much collaborating with the Cheetah Conservation Fund. But started up this little small trust, and we sort of a year and a half into it and broadening our area and range, and now really trying to get some stuff moving on African wild dogs, particularly outside of national parks.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so pretty challenging as well, I'm sure. As you say, starting out, being pretty new. As it stands in Namibia, what's the wild dog population status? Are things looking good, going up, going down?
It's very unknown. I think there's just a big sort of blank in Namibia. So this is what we're trying to find out. What we are predominantly investigating, where it's kind of all started, is obviously the persecution of wild dogs. So active persecution by farmers and communities, killing African wild dogs. And nobody really knows how many packs, where they are. It's very undercover, very quiet in terms of what's happening. So it's debatable. Are they increasing? Are they decreasing? The last sort of estimate on a census we did was between 250 to 350 wild dogs left in Namibia. And that, based on some baseline data about 10 years ago, is about half of what was estimated then. So that's a clear indication we're on a drastic decrease. Over 10 years, we've lost 50%. But the reality is we actually really don't know. The assumption is it's decreasing. Loss of habitat. These are the issues. More persecution, increased persecution. So we're standing on the grounds at the moment that African wild dogs are critically endangered in Namibia, decreasing. Their range was up to Etosha National Park up until 1990, and even further south, and now they're extinct completely in those areas. So logic says we're in trouble, but nationally, statistically, we don't know, and this is what we're trying to find out.
Yeah, so a big challenge ahead, and I mean, I know how difficult those things can be. Wild dog territories, home ranges being so massive, and you've mentioned that you worked with the cheetahs for quite a long time, Cheetah Conservation Trust. Tell us a bit about Namibia's wildlife in general. What are some of those challenges that you face in conservation?
Yeah, so Namibia, we're quite fortunate in the sense that pre-independence and as our constitution was being written up, Namibia's government was very forward-thinking, and conservation is actually in our constitution. So we've got a very strong wildlife conservation ethos. And as a result, look, we've got vast landscape, lots of open landscape, small, population. So we have a lot of wildlife that is considered free range and have access to move quite a lot. So yeah, and these are animals like elephant and rhino, predators, obviously, that in some other countries are much more confined to smaller sort of isolated areas. So Namibia's wildlife, yeah, it's at a pretty, we're pretty good with where we are. There's definitely been increase over the years, but we have seen droughts, and that always puts more problems on. Of course, we have more people, more livestock farming. So in terms of where we are, I'm a firm believer that we leaps and bounds ahead because of our community-based wildlife sector and program, where we have communities living with wildlife, benefiting from wildlife, managing wildlife, owning wildlife, and conserving. So yeah, I mean, it's lessons learned as things change and the world changes and people's needs and wants change. But in general, we're doing pretty well.
Well, that's good news. I mean, we always have such difficulty in bringing positive feeling, at least around conservation, to our viewers, and in conservation in general around the world. It's not always easy to paint a positive picture. So that's obviously really good news. But it sounds like your major challenges are pretty typical. It would be one of loss of habitat, basically, for your wild species, and then environmental factors like drought in a very dry country in general. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, we've had some trouble getting hold of you because you've been playing out in the field recently. So tell us about some of the projects you've been working on.
Oh, well, we've gone into a much bigger area at this stage, and offhand, I'm not going to be able to tell you exactly how many square kilometers, but basically it's the Otjozondjupa, Omaheke, Kavango sort of regions of Namibia, and it's huge. It's massive. It's probably, if not a quarter, maybe a fifth of our whole landscape. So these are the three regions that our big focus is on, and we've through the Cheetah Conservation Fund and the work they've been doing, we have a good idea of what's going on with wild dogs there. So now we're trying to find out about wild dogs elsewhere. So we've got some partnerships with the Namibia Nature Foundation, WWF Namibia, the Kwandu Carnivore Project, obviously our Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Tourism through the Directorate of Scientific Services. So what we've pretty much been doing this last year, 2021, which was interesting was setting ourselves up in where we sort of thought would be a good focal area to be, getting a feel of what's going on there, and then we've just been going out, following tips, finding out information, responding, confirming is this wild dogs, is this not wild dogs, is there a denning area, do they breed, what's the status on these farms. And so we've just been mapping out pretty much where there seems to be wild dog presence, where we can confirm these are denning established packs, and levels of conflict and perception.
Well, that's amazing. And as you say, I can't believe the amount of ground that you have to cover, to get even a picture of what's going on out there. What's your general feeling at the moment? Have you been sort of nicely surprised by what you found, or has it been pretty much middle of the road?
I've, let's say, not been surprised.
Okay.
I mean, it's well known that African wild dogs are probably one of the most hated carnivores, with farming communities, livestock and game farms. And they've got the history with the very negative perception. The guys that obviously do a lot of this way before I have, EWT, Cole Duplessis, Derek van der Merwe, Greg Rasmussen, just to name a few of the guys that I talk to. Now, these guys know how bad the history is of African wild dogs. So it's not surprising. It's just the same here. I mean, they are hated more than any other carnivore. And of course, the social scientist in me comes out when I'm trying to understand this. And it's quite interesting what some of the farmers say. And a lot of it's got to do with that emotional connection on the way that African wild dogs kill. So, their cattle are very, very special to them. There's a big connection between our people and cattle. And, to see what injured livestock look like when they've been drilled by wild dogs, the way that wild dogs eat, to them, it's like vicious, it's emotional. Whereas they'll tell you, oh, a leopard is better because when you find the carcass, it's already eaten and it's there. But wild dogs, it's a very messy affair. So there's this incredible emotional connection to that. And then even the names, for example, in the Ochi-Herero language, the name for African wild dogs is Ohakane. And Ohakane directly translated means to grab. And it's grabbing in a way that you would, badly, grabbing something from someone's hand and you would be reprimanded. So even just that name, that they've named it, it's very negative, very, very negative.
Yeah.
But definitely what we have found out more and more is that there's very little understanding of the ecology of African wild dogs. They think they breed all year round. They think there are hundreds of them because they see them in these huge areas. They don't always know about the pack dynamics and the social behaviors and how they work. So very little information that people are aware of in terms of the ecology of wild dogs.
Interesting. Yeah, not uncommon. I mean, you've seen it with a number of different species across Africa, in the world, where particular animals get a bad reputation, whether it be from a cultural point of view or, as you say, from a more direct impact like cattle farming, etc. So, I mean, that's going to be a major challenge, I know, going forward. It always has been, as you say, with wild dogs. Yeah. But having said that, what are some of the positives regarding wildlife living outside the protected areas that you've seen, in the last year or so?
Yeah, well, we've already got a very established wildlife project and program through our communal conservancies in Namibia with wildlife outside of parks. So there's been extensive work done with local communities where there's been benefits associated to wildlife. So that's predominantly through the tourism, hospitality industry, various different kinds. And there's been big focus on assisting farmers with conflict mitigations, with lions, other carnivores, conflict mitigations with elephants. So either they've been supplied with the equipment and the tools to deal with these things, education, training on farming management, all that kind of stuff. But with African wild dogs, nothing. There's been no focus, and I might get a few people here saying challenge, but really it's not. It's if you're going to look at the scale of things, it's been nothing. So no funding, no focus, no anything addressing African wild dogs in Namibia that are outside of national parks. So it's, we've got a lot, I would say, under control with these high profile species that we have. We've got the desert adapted lions, desert adapted elephant, we've got the black rhino programs. We've got a lot of that stuff going on, which are these iconic species in Namibia. And then here we have this absolutely phenomenal animal, which I know you agree with. And there's nothing, just there's nothing been helped or anything happening with it. So so that's where we kind of are.
Well, good on you for giving it a go, because I know it's going to be a long, hard road, and I can see you're pretty passionate about it and committed to getting it going. Out there, what keeps you going? What keeps you going though? What is some of the highlights that make you feel like this is the way forward? And do you have any special memories out there, or a sighting of wild dogs that sticks out that made you, think that this is what I want to commit to?
Well, I think it's madness. I don't know what I'm getting myself into, to be honest.
It sounds pretty challenging, I will agree. Yeah.
Yeah, so, it's kind of all fell into place. I worked in the Zambezi for quite a long time, and obviously African wild dogs are resident there in the different national parks. So I was dealing with a lot more conflict with elephant, hippo, lions, stuff like that. So working in and out of the parks, I'd see wild dogs, and it was always, I knew it was special and it was lovely and sort of enjoyed it, but knew nothing about really anything. It just was nothing. And then when I moved into the Orca Carrara area with the Cheetah Conservation Fund, and these wild dogs kept coming up, we sort of wanted to find out more. And it turned into this, I kind of refer to my experience there as chasing ghosts. So for a good 4 solid years, I was just trying to find these dogs. And I never saw, I didn't see a live dog from 2018, 2020, I saw my first live dog. So, and I was behind them all the time. We were tracking. I mean, they would loop behind us. It was just incredible. And then with camera traps, with CCF and a part of their sort of identification program, we started seeing these were established packs. It was the same dogs every year coming through, same territories. But of course, we were finding all the conflicts. So the persecution of dogs in that area is the method that is used is destroying dens. So the moment a den pops up, people will actively seek out dens, dig them up. Unfortunately, it's lethal persecution of the pups and adults if they can. And that way they sort of do this. So this is what we were coming across a lot. And just the more I started trying to read about dogs, the more I started reading what other people were doing and watching, the interviews and stuff that was going out. And there was sort of just, I just wanted to find out more. I wanted to know more about dogs. So I would say spending all that time trying to find them was definitely a drive. And I think a turning point really for me, if you ask for a special experience, was last year, no, 2020, sorry, COVID had sort of, come into place, and initially we were on all these lockdowns, regional lockdowns, and as soon as I could move, I was stuck here at the coast. As soon as it opened up, I bolted up to Okakarara, ready to stay there for as long as it took. So I did a solid 8 months there. And it was difficult. I was working with limited numbers of people, and alone most of the time at times, but I was working with 2 of the community game guards. And yeah, so we were just running around with dogs and responding to conflict and talking to farmers and trying to set up a communication network where we could all warn each other where dogs were and chase them out of that, and work with farmers on protecting calves. Yeah, so we sort of got through the denning season, and we lost a few dens, but there was a pack that was hanging around that had pups, and I was getting reports of sightings. So yeah, I think it must have been September or October 2020, I had a student join me, and from the area, Patura, wonderful guy, tall, 23-year-old, just graduated, and he came out to help me, and I definitely put him through some drills. And when we were driving around, we would have chats about procedures, how to approach, what to do, don't destroy dens. And I said we had this discussion really about what to do if you come across a dog that is either hit by a car, still alive, or in a trap, or injured. What is your first aid treatment? And I kind of went through, you treat for shock. This is now sort of what we go through. And yeah, this particular morning, I happened to be away from camp because out there we've got no comms. So I need to go to a settlement to get cell phone network and get onto my emails. And these messages started coming through from Patura and also from one of the farmers who we work a lot with, saying 2 pups had been hit in the road, and this is intentional persecution like we see all over Africa. And this guy had these 2 puppies. So it was kind of a, oh my gosh, okay, first time I've dealt with live African wild dogs. So raced back there, and yeah, in that I got there just after Patura managed to get there. And unfortunately, one of the pups had actually died in the night. This guy had them in the back of his bakkie. And that Patura, oh, what a wonderful kid. He did everything I told him to treat for shock. And to this day, I will say this boy saved that dog's life. So yeah, anyway, here we had this 5-month-old wild dog pup in a box, and I did another sort of quick scan, consulted with a vet, really trying to determine, what do we do with this? Do I take it to a vet? Do I, what do I do? And so we did a quick field check, and we were very sure that we weren't dealing with internal damage. We were very sure that there was no major breaks or fractures or anything of the sort. He definitely had a nice bump on his left hip, and he was quite limpy on that. But of course, this absolutely just terrified pup. And I'd heard about how dogs freeze. They absolutely, everyone thinks they're so scary, but really when they just freeze in fear. So we just have this dilemma of instinct. What do we, oh man, if this dog goes out of here, it's going to end up in captivity. What do we do? And I got on the phone with Derek van der Merwe from EWT, desperate phone call, this sort of going, what do I do? And he said to me, Nadja, find that pack. He said, find that pack. It will not leave. They just find the pack and get that pup back. So obviously, getting permissions from the Ministry of Environment and Tourism, always in contact with them, I just said, okay, I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to try. So we drove back to where the pup had been hit in the road. And there was a lot of tracks going around where you could see the pack had come back. And of course, we started using on our speakers the woo call. So we were using the sound, we'd do the call, and Patura and I were sitting there listening. And they were sort of, no, nothing. Okay, we're going to drive another 5 Ks down, and did it again. It was starting to get dark. And there's a particular grouse out there, like a bird, and it also has a similar little call. And every time we'd hear that, we'd both look at each other. It would be that, no, it's not a dog, it's not a dog. Yeah, so we kept going down. I think it must have been about 4 times, and you're just starting to get a little bit more sort of like, this is not going to happen. And yeah, at the spot about 20 Ks down, there was this response very far. And again, Patura and I just looked at each other because neither wants to say, that's a dog. And then it went again,
dogs, yeah.
and we both said, those are dogs. And so, and then the woo call was closer. And I said to Patura, they're coming. We have no idea what we're doing. This is just instinct. We've got this pup in a cardboard box. And I just said to Patura, you get the pup, get the box. I'm going to get the speaker. I'm going to try to get my camera. Are we just going to walk into this cattle camp, like 100 meters? And we're just going to see what happens. And we scrambling. And the next thing, right next to the car, I just hear this warning bark. Whoa! And we both turn, and there is this, it must have been the alpha male, I would assume. I mean, must have bolted. He was ahead of the pack, and he came right into us and did this warning bark and then ducked out again. And Patura and I were just like, oh! So yeah, we sort of scrambled over this cattle fence. I lost my camera. I threw my sunglasses. We were just going through the bush. I just said, let's get into the bush, get into the bush. And we could hear these dogs just around us. You know, they were there. And this pup was getting fidgety, and it's not a very firm cardboard box that we have. And eventually we got to a spot, sat down, and the dogs were calling, and this pup wasn't responding or anything, but very fidgety. And I just said to Patura, let it out. Let's just let it out. So we opened it up. We just sat there, and this dog, I mean, this is now, you know, like dusk. It's not great. And this pup missioned off into a bush, and it stopped there. And the dogs were calling, and we just heard this pup, this little, silent little small woo call. And the dogs responded, and we heard that pup move. And then, you know, at a distance away, we could hear them greeting. And it was the twittering and all of that excitement. And I burst into tears. I just started crying. And I've got this Patura sort of patting me on the shoulder going, it's okay, don't worry. And we were high-fiving each other. And it was like just the most incredible experience I've ever had. And I've got experiences of releases of animals, but I mean, that sealed the deal, where I was like, you know, my career is now 17 years working within the dynamics of wildlife, and I've always thought I've had some pretty sort of good moments or highlights, but that was it. That was done and dusted. The bug bit me like they have with many other people. And I consider that probably one of my biggest successes to date, was just getting that pup back and the greeting, and that was it. So that's my most special moment.
Well, that's pretty special. That must have been absolutely incredible. And as you say, inspiring for you and for people listening. So thanks for sharing that with us. So many challenges for you, you know, and conservation in general. Can people help or get involved with the Kalahari African Wild Dog Conservation Trust?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think our biggest priority right now is getting people to sort of follow our media, really, because that's currently our Facebook and Instagram, and we picking up on our website. You know, we're really getting established. But at this point, I think it's get onto our media and follow what's going on, because this is what's happening in Namibia. We try to post regularly from the field, real time. We are super keen to start doing like live interactions through these things with people. So, you know, for me, getting involved, you know, follow us, you know, find out what's going on, because it's some good stuff. And, you know, we certainly, in collaboration and discussions and talks with a lot of different organizations and the ministry. And, you know, we're very small and we're getting there. Funding is always a fantastic opportunity, of course. You know, but I think, you know, we're small, our overheads are not huge, so we're okay. I kind of just go, you know, we're okay. We definitely need funding for collars. That's our hardest thing. But I think our real priority is the dogs and the story that the dogs have to tell. And, you know, we're on this brand new journey of finding new packs and meeting them, essentially. And I think this is something that is a great opportunity for the public and interested parties to join us on this and get to know these dogs.
Amazing, Nadja. Thank you so much for chatting to us today, for that great story about the, you know, release of that young pup. Lots of challenges ahead, I know, and we've touched on many of those, but I think you know, we've seen some positives. You've seen positives in Namibia with other species, and I'm sure with people like you at the helm working on, you know, difficult projects like this, well, you know, those positive stories don't come without people like you. So thank you for that. Keep up the good work. As I said, thank you for joining us today, and we'll be keeping an eye on you folks and see what you get up to in the next few months and years.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Great pleasure. And thank you all for joining us today on the show. Please join us again next week, where we'll be going through some wonderful new conservation chats with some new visitors. And so Africam4Good will be there to join you then. So don't forget to like and subscribe, stay informed for any of our upcoming shows. But for now, it's cheers from all of us.